"Where did you obtain those?" she inquired, shocked. "Really? I show you a clear image of you cheating on me, and your first response is to ask, where did I obtain it? Is it important where I received it? So here's my solution to your question. Change the fact that you are cheating on me using it." I asked my wife of 7 years, "Honey, I know it looks bad, and I admit we kissed, but it's not cheating. As you can see from the photo, we are in full view of many others. We were not doing anything else." "Of course," she responded. "So that's your primary defense? There is no explanation for who you are making out with or why you are doing so. You're presuming that since you're not doing it with him in the photo on the dance floor, it's just fine. I need to know. Tracy, is that your definition of honoring your wedding vows? Brian, I can tell you're quite upset about this. You have nothing to worry about. I swore. We were caught off guard. And then it occurred. You do not need to worry about it. Making a huge issue out of it will not improve matters," she stated strongly. "Innocent. Innocent? You still haven't told me his name. Why should I be sad over someone I don't know?" I spit sarcastically. "Is it important what his name is? If I tell you, you might do something stupid like start a fight and he'll wipe the floor with you. I will not let that happen." She objected. "I see. Thank you for being honest and transparent. You've made your decision. Now I will make mine," I responded hotly. I turned back, hurried up the stairs, and began packing my suitcase, which would hold enough for roughly a week. She swiftly followed me. "What are you doing now? How does it look like? Packing a luggage. But why?" "Because I can't take any more of your lies and deception. I need to leave and think carefully before saying or doing something I may regret." I let out a growl. "Don't be so foolish, Brian. I knew you would never strike me for anything till tonight. I knew you wouldn't cheat on me. So I suppose we don't know each other as well as we believed. Cheating. Who claimed I cheated on you?" Tracy responded angrily. "Kissing him was not cheating, and you know it. I have never cheated on you." "There he is," I replied sarcastically. "What constitutes a blatant lie?" "But Brian, I have never cheated on you. I didn't cheat on you with him or anyone else," she exclaimed. "So what do you call it?" And I showed her another picture I took that night. "Isn't it a fairly good picture of you entertaining him? But where? How? Here you go again. Does it really matter where I acquired the photo or how I came to have it? Does this knowledge erase the fact that you cheated on me and lied to my face?" She threw the pictures on the floor and sobbed, attempting to hug her husband. "Stay away from me, Tracy. Communication is two-way street. I gave you an opportunity to be completely honest with me. And come clean. But you do not have to believe I am worthy of the truth. If you had been honest, I could have stayed and attempted to talk to you about it for the sake of our son. But you seem to be asking too much of me. I am taking my phone. If you call me again for any reason other than an emergency involving little Bobby, I will block your number. Do I express myself clearly?" She nodded and I stormed out, angry off, frustrated, and deeply upset. Friday night, I checked into the motel. I resolved to spend the weekend considering my future moves if I divorced her. This was my instinctive reaction. Bobby would end up in a single-parent household, and I would be required to pay alimony and child support. I wish she had given me an explanation, or at least apologized. Perhaps she did not have time to think about it. That's why I decided it would be best for us to stay apart while I considered our next steps. The absence of my wife and son was taking a toll on me, and the loneliness was excruciating. I cried until I passed out shortly before noon the next day. Messages started to arrive. After receiving my engineering degree, I took a work at a local chemical laboratory, which was a packaging plant for a large chemical company. After 5 years there, I was given the post of production manager at the flagship Research and Development Center, located 1,000 miles distant. With expanded responsibilities came a big income boost. So we leaped at the opportunity and relocated. We left all of our friends and family behind. Tracy was hired as a call center representative for a major credit card firm. The call center employed more than 1,200 workers, the majority of whom were Tracy's age. Little Bobby was born 1 year after we moved in. I convinced her to become a stay-at-home mom because I was highly compensated. However, she enjoyed spending time with her co-workers. Her work colleagues rapidly became our pals. We were part of an informal group of 6 to 12 couples that met roughly every 2 months, sometimes at home, but more typically in a restaurant or club. The girls were co-workers, and the guys, like me, were their husbands. That isn't to say I didn't have friends at work. However, Tracy worked aggressively to ensure that our social calendar was primarily made up of her coworkers. I had no objections because they were all decent enough. The women were all breathtakingly beautiful, as were their husbands. I felt out of place among the debonair and stylish gentlemen, but they all treated me the same as the rest. My current deluge of males originated with this group. Tracy had clearly not only informed them of our concerns, but also provided them with specifics, and they were all pleading with me to give them an audience and assist resolve the situation as soon as possible. I shook my head, amazed at how she kept her attempt for me while openly sharing the facts with our friends. Now I was wondering what kind of buddies they truly were. I dislike other people knowing about my affairs, particularly my personal life and the intimate facts of my marriage. This circumstance itself disturbed me. Tracy was the only individual who did not contact me via phone or text. She knew I'd keep my pledge to block her. Cassidy. It appeared to be the instigator of everything that was happening. She was Tracy's best friend, and they were in on the scheme like thieves. She asked me to meet the group at her place on Sunday night at 6 o'clock. My analytical mind suspected that this could be a trap. My car could be blocked, or the guys could try to stop me from leaving, if I chose to leave the meeting earlier than they desired. I texted back saying I'd meet them at the Angus Steakhouse restaurant. I could park my car so that it would not be obstructed, and in the case of a public eatery, I could leave whenever I wished. They reluctantly granted my request. I agreed to the meeting for a number of reasons. First, find out why Tracy did what she did. Second, I was curious what our friends thought about the infidelity. Which side would they be on? Third, I wondered if any of them were involved in her exploits. Did they know? Did they set it up? If they were aware of her extracurricular activities, none of them expressed their worries to me. I never backed down in the face of a confrontation. As an account manager, I've experienced practically every problem imaginable and know how to remain calm in any situation. I was excited to learn more so I could make an informed decision or put them on the spot. I parked my car at a nearby store and walked to the restaurant. I understood the gang had arrived far earlier than scheduled to discuss tactics and prepare for the encounter. This entertained me. There was just one seat at the table, which was next to Tracy. She instantly up to greet me as I approached. I stopped her before she could approach me. If you don't mind, I'd want to sit at the far end of the table, away from her. If you don't mind. However, if you don't mind, I can comfortably seat at the opposite table, I explained. Cassidy spoke swiftly before Tracy could answer. Of course, Brian is fine with that. Jared, what about giving Brian a seat at the end of the table? Brian, please have a seat. You are our guest tonight, so your dinner is already paid for. Why don't we all go ahead and order? Our group was seated in a separate dining room of the restaurant designated for overflow. They must have taken care to keep it hidden from prying eyes. Everyone promptly placed their orders and the process was completed. Before I let Cassidy or anyone else take over the chat, I wanted to get at least one response before moving on. I distributed 2 copies of the photo of Tracy and the mystery man kissing on the dance floor, one on the left and one on the right. I began. You all seem quite interested in Tracy and I resolving our problems. I was startled that she told someone about our personal concerns before she and I had a chance to discuss them, but it simply demonstrates her continuous disregard for me and our marriage. Cassidy began to speak, but I interrupted her before the discussion could begin. I need an answer. And now take a good look at this photo. Do you see the man? She refuses to provide his name. I'm sure at least one of you knows who he is. You all claim you want to help us address our difficulties. Well, right now I need the greatest aid with information. If none of you can be honest with me and offer the facts as they are, we will have nothing more to talk about. There was perfect stillness around the table. Even Cassidy, who is normally outgoing, hesitated to speak. Neither of them offered to say they didn't know the man or to tell me who he was. I had my own response. I appreciate your time. I hope someone is hungry enough to eat my steak. I have simply lost my appetite. Nobody here seems to want to help us heal our relationship. I'm sorry. I got up from the table and departed. Tracy called after me, imploring me to return, but no one else did. It was evident that our pals were yours and not mine. Tracy Cassidy and the rest of the group were astonished. They had intended to have a sensible discussion with me, but my obstinate demand caught the entire gathering off guard. It would require some real strategy to get through to me, and they weren't prepared for it at the time. I didn't mention it in the restaurant, but I was leaving the motel. I stopped at a fast food restaurant and had a bite to eat. When I arrived home, I spoke with the babysitter Tracy had hired for the evening, paid her, and thanked her for her assistance. I immediately finished my meal and began swiftly moving my clothes and personal items into the spare bedroom. I'd previously gone to the local hardware store over the weekend and purchased a pair of locks with identical keys to those on our front and rear doors. I installed them on the spare bedroom door and the hall bathroom door, retaining just the keys for myself, not to avoid a verbal fight with Tracy, but to prevent her from physically seducing me in the shower or in the middle of the night when I was sleeping. Once situated in the house, I joyously played with my 3-year-old son, who was the light of my life, before bathing him and putting him to bed. Tracy must have realized I was home because my car was in the garage when she arrived at 10:15 p.m. They must have had an actual brainstorming session. I had no notion which was true, as sad as that sounds. She ran upstairs, delighted to see me again, and saw me in Bobby's room, sitting in a chair, watching my son sleep blissfully, tears flowing down my cheeks. I shushed her and waved her away before she entered the room. There was no need to disturb his peaceful sleep once I carefully closed the door. She attempted to hug me, but I was unable to endure it. She smiled from ear to ear. "I'm delighted you're back home where you belong. Allow me to make you something to eat. We have a lot to talk about." I had already eaten, but thank you for the offer. "So, where were you all this time?" "Entertaining your lover" was once again alluded at. "I understand. I've just left the steakhouse. They can attest that they assisted me in finding the appropriate words to get us back on track. I have a lot to tell you," she explained. "I'll chat to you about anything if you tell me the name of your partner. If you can't accomplish that, we'll have nothing to talk about." "I cannot. I simply can't," she said sullenly. "I wish you will keep me as your husband, at least half the dedication you have for your partner. I'll remain in the guest bedroom till further notice. Please stay away from me and do not touch me. Who knows what terrible diseases you have inside you now. But I refuse to allow your horrors keep me from my son. He needs me just as much as you do. If you ever decide you're ready to chat, your next words to me will be your lover's name. But if you're willing to give up our marriage to protect him, then so be it. However, I do not want you to speak to me again until you are willing to give up your lover's name. You could be planning to take our son and move in with him tomorrow, all without my knowledge." She walked away, sobbing and dropping her head. Tracy and I liked talking to Bobby for a week, but we did not say anything to each other. Finally, on Monday night after work, when I returned home, I was met with a surprise. Everything was great before I entered the house, but they clearly wanted to surprise me. As I entered the kitchen to see what we were having for supper, a mob poured in from the surrounding rooms and surrounded me. Tracy's couple friends gathered. They all appeared to be present, and they could not wait to see me again. Nothing was said to irritate me, but I had the impression they were treading carefully. The first thing I said was, "Where is Bobby?" I concluded that adult talk should not be held around my son. I've already left him off at the babysitter's house, and she's arranged for him to remain overnight. Tracy explained. "I see," I said, surprised. There had been some pre-planning that I was unaware of, but I didn't see any of your cars parked in the street. We wanted to surprise you, Brian, so we all parked a block away from the house and began walking. We couldn't risk you simply driving past after seeing all of our cars, Cassidy protested. "Well, you all took me off guard. What is the matter? Why are all of you here? Has anything lately changed that I am not aware of?" I inquired. "Yes, honey," Tracy began. "Why don't we all gather in the living room and explain everything? I am ready to answer your query right now." "Sure, but first I need to use the restroom for a minute. I just arrived home. I will be right there. Why don't you just go ahead?" I went to the restroom down the hall, peeked, flushed, and washed my hands. My cell phone is now recording. I tucked it into my shirt pocket, where the camera lens was barely visible in case something exciting happened, and joined the gathering in the living room. I was shocked to find 2 other folks there who had never been in the kitchen before. Tracy was cheating by sitting next to a lovely woman who was little younger than him. Tracy began. "Brian, you've previously met everyone but Elliot Franklin and his wife, Gail. They've been a long-time member of our friend group, but you have never met them before. I realize this may surprise you, but you were so determined to find out who he was that we all agreed that this was the best method to find out his name. If you try to attack him, all of the guys here have volunteered to stand between you. We do not want anyone to be wounded today. So you've finally given me a face. Isn't it a little late to worry about me getting hurt? I said cynically. I got it. Neither of you were concerned about hurting me, were you? You only worried about keeping the boy Wonder safe, didn't you? Do not worry. I am not going to touch that jerk. Tracy let out a disappointed groan, saying, I don't want to catch any of the diseases he may have already infected. Cassidy jumped in. Brian, we understand your frustration. Can we communicate calmly and professionally as friends while this matter is being resolved? We are making every effort to fulfill your request. You sought his name and now you know it. We assumed you would also want to speak with him. As you can see, we've already made arrangements for it. However, Elliot does not require me to speak for him or on his behalf. He is fully capable of speaking for himself. Our role today is simply to introduce you to each other. Following the introductions, Elliot stood up and extended his hand. I am afraid we have gotten off to a horrible start. I hope that at the end of this meeting we will be friends, or at least civil to one another. I promise to always treat you with respect and kindness, and I hope you do the same. Brian, may I call you Brian? He asked, holding out his hand to me. I did not move in response to his gesture, keeping my hands by my side. First and foremost, Mr. Franklin, because we are only meeting for the first time, I would prefer that you call me Mr. Wilson. I can't think that our amicable relationship would require such familiarity. Second, you have just vowed to treat me with respect and courtesy after showing me flagrant contempt. And yet I am meant to disregard your tremendous arrogance and treat you graciously in return. Fair enough, Mr. Wilson. My idea was exclusively related to our chat today. I wasn't referring to previous occurrences or situations. If you will allow me, I would like to speak with you about what transpired between me and Tracy, your wife. Please don't mention her name or refer to her as my wife in front of me. That title may be short-lived and disagreeable to me. I'm weighing the advantages and drawbacks of divorce, which I'm sure you're already aware of. How do I address her then? Mr. Wilson, you may refer to her as the woman I married, which I will accept for the time being. Very nicely, Mr. Wilson. I'd like to inform you about what occurred between the woman you married and me. I hope I can present the circumstances in a way that you will find acceptable. I am completely yours, Mr. Franklin. Please educate me, I asked. The pompous man took a big breath and started making his argument. Look around the room, Mr. Wilson. What are you seeing? I will tell you what you see. You see a room full of extremely lovely ladies and men, including your wife and yourself. Do you believe this is a coincidence? Doesn't it strike you that your best friends are a group you've spent many hours mingling with? Turn out to be significantly more appealing than the usual man or woman you encounter. This bunch inevitably banded together, like birds of a feather. As the friendships developed, so did the intimacy and demonstrations of friendship. Everyone in this room has a nice, stable, and committed relationship. That is our first and greatest goal. When each person is secure in their relationship with their soulmate, we will recognize that no force on earth can separate us. And everyone here believes the same thing about you and the woman you married, he added. Take my wife here, Gail. She is as wonderful to me as any woman in this room, and we intend to spend the rest of our lives together. No man in this room, including you, can ever take her away from me, and that understanding gives me the confidence to share her with others for our own and others' benefit in our group. We learn and grow more than if we remained monogamous. It's an outmoded and archaic concept that no longer bonds people together in the same way that true love does, which consists of trust, intimacy, understanding, sharing, and opening doors to wonderful and beautiful things in our marriage. How wonderful for you and your wife, Mr. Franklin, and the rest of this bunch, if they are all free to interact with one another without constraint. But this has nothing to do with me or the woman I married. Excuse me, Mr. Wilson, but didn't you just say that your relationship with the woman you married is less trusting, understanding, and secure than any other couple in this room? Don't you see the huge benefit and potential for growth in your relationship if you open yourself up to that? He opened his arms wide as if to embrace everyone in the room. If what you say is true, Mr. Franklin, you've just labeled every woman in the room a cheater, including the one I married. I am astonished that you were so easily confused and changed the morals of the lady I married. I believe your conduct unfortunate and reprehensible. A gentleman does not interfere in marital affairs as you have done. Mr. Wilson, I understand where your erroneous thinking leads you. Rest assured, this isn't a one-sided strategy. You, too, are being asked to adopt the ideas we all hold dear here. You could be with any lady in this room right now if you wanted. When you and the woman you married joined our organization, it was unavoidable that you would be invited to collaborate with us in every way possible. If you hadn't told her off so brutally that evening, she had planned to bring it up with you and talk about the potential benefits she saw in this experience. Mr. Wilson, the woman you married, claimed you accused her before she had a chance to properly explain what was going on. She panicked and retreated in defense, unsure how to salvage a conversation with you given the hostile environment you presented to her. I am confident you will agree that everything we recommend is good to you and the woman you married. All that remains is to find a way to make yourself more comfortable. I see, I said, as if serious about all he had stated. Then I looked Tracy directly in the eyes and asked, "Is this all true? You discussed all of this with them without my awareness, and then agreed to test the waters with Mr. Franklin to see whether it would benefit us as husband and wife." Tracy nodded uneasily before explaining without first discussing it with me. "I've heard how lovely it is to have such loose associations and how it improves and strengthens their marriages. So I wanted us to have the same experience with Elliot. I was reviewing the entire experience to see if it could benefit our relationship. Honey, please know that my love for you has never wavered, and I just wanted to share you what I learned from him, to persuade you that engaging in the experience would benefit both of us." She smiled pleasantly, aware that this was the first genuine conversation I'd allowed her to have with me since that night. "So you want me to believe that one amazing session with a super guy taught you the abilities of an experienced prostitute? After all, it wasn't your first time with him, right?" She averted her attention to her feet, reluctant to establish eye contact, which confirmed my assumptions. Mr. Franklin jumped up again. "Don't you see, Mr. Wilson? We were able to make the woman who married you comprehend the advantages. You will also be able to participate in all ways. There may also be additional benefits that you have not considered," he added. "I see. So you fancy yourself as some sort of Casanova, Mr. Wilson? I am a very experienced and attentive lover who can teach less experienced lovers, such as the woman you married. She will flourish, grow, and learn as a result of my experiences, and you will benefit from her newfound knowledge. Time spent with myself and others will broaden her perspectives. Please do not be defensive when I explain this to you. Everyone has periods of complacency and regularity in their lives." I looked Tracy full in the eyes again. When was the last time I said no to a new experience? If you believe we need to improve our relationship, why didn't you discuss it with me before getting into bed with a womanizer? She gave a cautious reply. "Please do not misunderstand me, honey. You are such a gentle and sweet lover, which is exactly what I need most of the time. But sometimes I wish things were more powerful and direct. That is exactly what Elliot showed me. He never sought to replace you in my heart. He is your physical opposite. All I could do was refrain myself from reaching out and destroying the guy. If I allowed myself to believe that Tracy and I could mend our relationship and make it work for my son, it would be lost forever." A hurricane roared within me, slamming mercilessly on my chest. Outwardly, I appeared cool and unconcerned. Now that I'd made the irreversible decision to divorce her, my new mission was to acquire as much ammunition as possible to return fire on all of them, causing as much disruption in their life as possible for their role in the collapse of my lovely household. "Thank you, Brian. Do you now have a more positive opinion of our group? Will you and Tracy join? You'll never regret it. This will only strengthen your marriage. I guarantee it." I grinned, as painful as it was to say it literally. I would like a bit more time to process everything that has been explained to me today. Tracy and I need to talk about something. One-on-one alone, only between the two of us. We will respond to you once we have resolved the matter. Is this good with you?" The butthole gave an evident feeble smile. He was having difficulty pretending to be courteous. He had not expected the delay, He required my response immediately away, but he wasn't going to get it. "Sure," he replied obediently. "Take all the time you need." Then he nodded. Gentlemen, the three biggest males instantly grabbed me and held me firmly. I was not going anywhere. Despite being securely held, I did not feel endangered in any way. It was only a surprise move. Tracy approached, took my cell phone out of my shirt pocket, and began recording all of the video she had recorded. "Please understand, Brian, we want to trust you. We actually do. But until you become one of us, we must take reasonable precautions to protect ourselves. It was clear that you were filming the events of the evening on your cell phone. I'm afraid we can't afford that degree of trust in you right now." Tracy nodded towards the butthole. He asked her, "So everything is gone, right?" "Everything?" Tracy nodded and said yes. "There will be no recording tonight." She then slid her phone into her pocket. It quickly became evident that she was already a full-fledged member of the club. He believed she would go against my wishes in order to satisfy them. Mr. Franklin added, "I demonstrated the look of defeat that this jerk was looking for. There you go, Brian. Do not be so depressed. I'd like to assume you've decided to keep a record, mostly so that you may better choose who you'll be with first when you attend our summit. But please understand that we just cannot take that risk. There is too much at stake." He patted me on the back, and the party silently exited the house. I grabbed my keys and went to the garage by myself. "Where are you going?" I asked Tracy, bewildered, if it was acceptable to pick up Bobby. I responded, "I was hoped to reestablish our physical acquaintance today. There's no reason to go fetch him right away, is there? I miss my son." "Obviously, you do not." "I'll return in a little bit," I advised. She took another hint, but I ignored it and went out the door. I drove to the Angus Steakhouse restaurant. I was hungry since I hadn't eaten dinner yet, and I was missing something I had ordered but not eaten the previous time I was there. The restaurant didn't disappoint, taking my time. I savored the delicate steak while reflecting on the happenings of the night. Hopefully, everything would turn out as planned. Only time will tell what type. Mrs. Stevenson thanked me for the large gratuity I had paid her in addition to her regular hourly wage. I could have to rely on her in the near future, so I wanted to establish friends with her in addition to Tracy. Bobby was ecstatic to meet Daddy, and he couldn't stop laughing all the way home. I bathed and fed him before putting him to bed for the night. Tracy informed me that she was preparing something light for us because we had not eaten. I told her that I had already eaten a snack and that she should take care of herself and not be concerned about being insulted by my pettiness. She dismissed me, not wanting to disturb Bobby with the approaching conversation. Because it was Monday night and we both had work tomorrow. I prepared for bed. She wanted to talk. "What is going on, Brian? You were very interested in Elliot's offer for our band, and then you dumped me like a hot potato. What happened? I'm really glad you asked. Allow me to respond to your inquiry with my own questions. Perhaps your responses will clarify," I offered. "Go ahead." She made a suggestion right before they left. "3 men seized me in my own home, and you never said anything against it. Is this true?" "It was not like that." She objected. "It was not like that, was it? 3 men grabbed and held me in my own house. Yes or no, Tracy? Did something happen?" "Yes." But before she could answer, I interrupted her. "Yes, it did. And did you say a word of protest to any of the other witnesses who were also silent?" "Yes or no, Tracy? Just answer yes or no," I commanded. "No." She answered with difficulty. "Finally, we are beginning to understand. Then listen carefully to the next question. Did I ask you to take my cell phone and delete anything from it? Did you? Yes or no? Tracy, come on, girl." "You were doing so well. Don't stop." "Be honest," I muttered. "No," she said quietly, "so please bear with me because this is going to be a long question. Be careful so I don't have to repeat myself. You admit that you had no objection to me being held in custody in my own home. You also admit that you took my cell phone and deleted the recordings from it? Not at my request, but at the request of someone other than your husband. Is that true, Tracy? Yes or no? Is this true?" "Yes, good girl. We're almost there now. Since I was standing right in the room when this happened and did not hear anyone tell you or ask you to delete anything from my personal phone, you must have tentatively entered into the conversation in my absence, then agreed to perform this task without my prior knowledge or consent. Is that correct?" Tracy looked down at her feet. "Yes, that's correct." I hadn't thought of it that way. You make it seem like a betrayal on my part. It is betrayal, Tracy. Now, let's go back to your first two questions. Why did I drop you like a hot potato? Why? Your own answer should reveal the truth about why I acted that way. You proved today that you are on their side. Not mine, not ours, but theirs. Now, if you have no objections, I'm going to bed alone again tonight. I don't want to watch and be around a man who so indifferently stabs me in the back. Tracy started sobbing as I left her in the hallway to contemplate her behavior. Of course, I locked the door sometime around 4 in the morning. I heard attempts to open the door. 3 or 4 fruitless turns were enough to foil her attempt. Tuesday morning, I was talking to the vice president in charge of the facility where I worked. Dan, could you recommend a divorce attorney for me? I mean, a good one. One that will fight as hard for the husband as he will for the wife. Please tell me you're not asking for one for yourself, Brian, Dan pleaded. Unfortunately, I am. I assumed a man of your position should be aware of such matters. You seem to know the rest. I grinned. I'm good friends with Ted. Russ. He's our contact with the firm that handles all of our legal matters. I'm sure he can give you the name of a good man. Let me give him a quick call and get back to you right away. Thanks, Dan. And no need to talk, Brian. This will remain just between you and me. I respect the other person's personal space. You don't know how good that feels to hear. Thank you, Dan. On Ted's recommendation, I called B. Thornton's office and set up an appointment for 2:30 that afternoon. It turned out that it was not the letter B, but B, that is Beatrice. She informed me that her caseload was 70% women and 30% men. But as soon as she agreed to take on a case, she took it on immediately and fought hard for her client, despite the formidable circumstances. It didn't take me long to convince her of the validity of my position as an injured party, and she was happy to take me on. She warned me that I would be paying child support for 15 years until Bobby turned 18, but college expenses are usually factored into these cases for the benefit of the child. I explained that I had no problem providing for my son, but I was hoping for at least $5,050 joint custody, either once a week or every other month. She can't promise anything, but will fight hard to get those terms. As for child support, she said, I would likely be on the hook for 3 to 5 years, depending on which judge we get because of the income disparity. The general result in this state was 1 year of alimony for every 2 years of marriage, up to 20 years of marriage. Thereafter, it was limited to 10 years, although I would have to put up with it. The thought of paying her to have fun with idiots pissed me off, expecting our family to grow. Tracy and I rented the house. We'd lived in for the past 4 years and diligently studied house plans and vacant lots on which to build our dream home. I had accumulated quite a few sketches depicting elements that were to be part of our special retreat. Now all those dreams were nothing more than smoke. At least the house didn't have to be sold, divided, or fought over. Bobby, at his tender age, wouldn't be attached to any particular dwelling. So if Tracy continued to rent the house, it wouldn't matter to me. I knew I'd never sleep in the master bedroom again, knowing it had been contaminated by that butthole. Who knows how many times he had already managed to. Chris in the bed with her before I discovered her infidelity. He explained that the average divorce in our state is 8 months if uncontested and a year if contested. I was really hoping I would fall into the 8-month number being bound in the bonds of marriage to a traitorous cheater. Held little appeal for me, now that my decision to divorce Tracy was clear. B also explained that there was no financial benefit to filing a declaration of infidelity. But she said that a declaration could be helpful if there was a disagreement over custody. She stated that she could have the paperwork ready for service as early as Thursday afternoon. I asked her to have Tracy serve the papers at work on Friday at 10 a.m., where many of her friends and colleagues could witness the event. After the divorce issues had been resolved and a fee agreed, I asked her about possible living arrangements until the divorce was finalized. What questions do you have, Brian? My only concern is time with my son in this early formative period of his life. 8 months to a year can seem like an eternity to both him and me. I don't want to be an absent father to him any more than necessary. Would it not be illegal or inappropriate for me to continue living in the same house with her to maximize my time with him? While that's not uncommon, Brian, it can be quite a challenge. How so? First of all, When she is served with the divorce papers on Friday, she will be extremely unhappy with you. If you are in close proximity to her home, she will likely rain fire and brimstone down on your head. Are you prepared to face the woman's wrath? Absolutely. I'll be able to easily share my emotions when she gets a summons, because in my mind we'll be legally separated and I'll be able to treat her indifferently as she's been treating me lately. And that brings me to my next point, Brian. She may well not want a divorce very often. Cheating wives want to have their cake and eat it too. Letting you go may be an impossible task for her, and she may do everything she can to prevent it. But this is a legal process, right? She can't bend the law to her will just because she feels like it. You're right, of course, but she could make a mess of things. B informed her. How so? If you enter into a conjugal relationship at any point before the divorce, the time limit will reset to 0, and the clock will start ticking from a new beginning, and you'll have to wait another 8 months, she said. The state will view your marital relationship as your desire to end the divorce process. That will never be a problem for me, although I can easily envision Tracy trying to lure me into her bed to disrupt the process. I have an iron will, be. I won't give in, I said firmly. You don't have to, she insisted. All Tracy has to do is claim that you had an affair. And unless you can prove otherwise, which is virtually impossible, the clock will be turned over whether you were married or not. The judge will have a hard time believing your claim that you were never intimate with her. Yet you lived together under the same roof. I've seen it happen before. Brian and I strongly advise against it, I countered. Let me ask you this. If she does make such a statement, would she have to give specific details such as time, place, etc.? I don't mean intimate details of the hypothetical session itself, but dates and times that I could refute. Yes, she wants to. But again, it would be your word against hers, and the judge would likely believe her, especially if she was tearfully persuasive. Leave it to me. Thank you, B. You've been a great help to me. I then talked to her about another legal issue I would have to deal with immediately after the divorce. Tracy usually gets home a half hour earlier than I do, so it was no surprise to find her cooking dinner in the kitchen, contrary to my custom. I avoided the kitchen and headed upstairs to take a shower since I started using the hall bathroom. She had fewer opportunities to trap me. I took a change of clothes with me to the bathroom. It was time to start practicing, living separately under the same roof. When I emerged from the bathroom fully dressed, she was waiting for me in the hall. Dinner will be ready in a few minutes. Bobby is already sitting in his high chair in the kitchen. You smell nice and fresh, she said coquettishly. I'll be right down. Thanks, I replied, ignoring her remark and unlocking my spare bedroom door. The tension was palpable, but she didn't say anything sarcastic. As we ate, she began. I'd like to explain that we made a cell phone deal last night. Knock yourself out, I said calmly while you were downstairs evaluating potential partners, and the three of us were alone upstairs. Elliot informed me that he knew you were recording the events of that evening, and that it would not be fair to let everyone be exposed to the professional risk you could expose the group to with the video. The right thing to do would to eliminate the threat. He said they couldn't leave there that night until the threat was neutralized. Not knowing if you had the password on your phone, they were willing to take it with them and return it later when it was cleared. Elliot suggested that I could prevent all of this by deleting the records myself. In your presence, I see. And why did they believe you were capable of such a thing towards your husband? Because I gave them my word, Brian. I don't understand. Understand what? Didn't you give me your word to be faithful to me on our wedding day? There was silence after my remark. I was glad for it. Darling, I don't want you to think that I'm on their side. That's not the case at all. It isn't? What if the circumstances had been different? What if those 3 men had grabbed you in our house? Do you think I would have just stood by silently and let them do it? What other choice did you have, Brian? The 3 of them could have easily taken you, silly. That's true. But that knowledge wouldn't have stopped me. Heck, it wouldn't even have slowed me down. I might have been defeated, but only after I'd done a lot of damage myself. I would have fought for you because I would have been on your side, not theirs. We were a team, you and I. Last night, you didn't act like my wife. You acted like one of them. I'm sorry, you don't understand me, Brian. I explained about the cell phone. I don't know what else to say. There's nothing more to say, is there? I joked about that subject. You're right. How did you find those pictures, Brian? I'd like to know. I'm sure you would. Wouldn't it be interesting if one of your friends turned out to be not as dedicated to your cause as the other members of your group? What if one of your coworkers turned you into me and delivered those pictures to my office? How would you feel about that? Who? Please tell me who. A man or a woman? She asked urgently. I can't tell you, Tracy. Why not? I gave my word, I said with a wide grin. I could see she wasn't getting anywhere with her questions, so she decided to broach another topic. Did you enjoy watching? No, I just saw a bunch of animals. That's exactly right, Brian. It doesn't have to be emotional for any of them. It will just strengthen our marriage. How did it go? Our marriage is hanging by a thread. I already feel closer to you, I added sarcastically. Don't be like that. You don't know what it's like. Tracy, has our life become so boring, mundane, and devoid of fantasy that you're afraid we can't survive as a couple without inviting other people into the bedroom? I didn't say that. It's not that we couldn't survive without it. But don't you want to do more than just survive? Shouldn't we take opportunities to strengthen our marriage when they come along? What's the harm in that? The harm, as I see it, is the destruction of the trust we once had. That is what you have already done with your experiments. Instead of strengthening our marriage, it is tearing the very fabric of it into perhaps no one you know considers fidelity an admirable character trait. But I do. Obviously, your friends don't give it much thought. They proved that last night. I don't trust you anymore, Tracy. You've proven you're perfectly capable of doing whatever you want behind my back. If it's so important to you and you believe in it so much, why didn't you come to me and talk things over with me before you jumped into bed with another man? Because I knew you would react that way. I thought that if I could participate and realize the benefits of it first, then I could bring everything I've learned to you. And we'd be better for it. When you see the improvements in me, I thought you would realize the value of it and agree with me wholeheartedly. So you and this smug butthole consider yourselves supreme and enlightenment and understanding, believing that lowlifes like me should be spoon-fed to slowly comprehend the life truths you both somehow instinctively grasp. How elitist of you to graciously allow your superior knowledge to trickle down to this lowly peasant. I didn't realize how lucky I was. Sarcasm was in my every word now, and she caught it. She said, "Why don't you let me show you what I've learned? I've adopted some techniques from Elliot and watched Gail closely last night as you asked. The purpose of this whole process is to improve our love life, not destroy it. Let me show you what I can do right now. I swear you won't regret it," she enthused. "Every time I look at you, I cringe. It's not conducive to me wanting to kiss you anytime soon. All you're going to offer me is a cheater who freely shares with other men what used to belong only to me. Only yours. You don't own me, Brian, and I never have and never will," she said defiantly. "You're absolutely right. I never claimed to own you. I mistakenly assumed you were mine because you said you gave yourself to me, and now you've taken your words back and given them to another man. You've broken something in me, Tracy, and I'm not sure it can be fixed." She started sobbing again. Needless to say, that was the last conversation I had with her until Friday. All of my free time was spent with Bobby. I didn't hesitate to change his diaper, and never once asked her to help me with him. We were almost playing a game of who bathed him the most. Bobby seemed to enjoy the constant attention, and I was happy about it too. Over the next few days, I researched the names of Elliot and Gail Franklin. I hoped to find their connection to the group, but I came up almost empty-handed. In public records, I found one Elliot Franklin, a homeless man who had been arrested for soliciting people for money downtown. The photo and age didn't even come close to the one who had entertained Tracy. I'll try to find out more about them. I decided to have Tracy over at 10 a.m. on Friday morning because I was attending a meeting of the local chapter of facilities managers. We usually meet every quarter, 4 to 4 hours, including lunch. Numerous contractors sponsored this event to advertise their services at the various facilities represented by members. Thus, not if, but when. Tracy calls. My secretary will confirm my extended absence, and I will intentionally leave my cell phone on silent mode. The only call I answered would be an emergency call requiring my attention at work. I wasn't avoiding Tracy at all. I just wanted to give her time to get over the initial shock before talking to her. When I eventually returned to work, I took her call, leaving numerous messages. I could hear her quickly moving out of sight as she started talking to me. "It's about darn time." "Are you serious?" "To get serviced in front of my friends. Do you know how embarrassed I was? Are you really going to divorce me over this? I told you it was nothing, Brian. When are you going to get that? Through your thick? Why won't you return my calls? Why do you refuse to talk to me about this? My secretary should have informed you that I'm in a management meeting. I just got back to the office and called you back right away. I have a job to do. You know, it doesn't stop just because you want to talk. And as for talking, when have I ever refused to talk to you? You're the one who's been avoiding talking to me for the last 2 days. I've never once refused to talk to you. I'm still talking to you now, aren't I? But since we both have work to do, why don't we resume this conversation at a more appropriate time after work? Then I will talk to you about anything you wish. She began to cry over the phone. I don't want a divorce, she wailed. Please, Brian, don't divorce me. We'll talk tonight, okay? Tracy. Okay, she said, snorting. I love you tonight then. Goodbye, Tracy. I only had one meeting left at work that day, and it was a short one concerning a lab that was having problems. I called our building automation contractor to resolve the problem surrounding yourself with quality people. Makes the job much easier. I arrived an hour early, as Friday afternoons tend to have fewer problems. Most people don't want to solve problems on a Friday afternoon. However, I realized that I would have to solve the problem. And the best way to do that is to pull myself together and face it head on. Realizing that she might not be in the mood to cook tonight, I grabbed some Chick-fil-A for dinner and texted her. She arrived shortly after I did. I grabbed his diaper bag and carried Bobby into the house from her car. She rushed to me, hugging me as I held our boy in my arms, knowing I wouldn't harshly rebuke her or upset Bobby. I set him in his high chair and helped feed him. Babies can be sloppy eaters, of course. He's at the stage where he likes to throw food, so there is very little food left on his tray for him to throw. She thanked me for the takeout food. We both cooed and talked happily with Bobby, although tears were streaming from her eyes at the same time. I spent most of the evening with him, never leaving his side until he was put down for the night again. He was my center of attention, my goal, my reason for enduring the dire circumstances. I knew what was in store for me, and I was as prepared for it as I could be. She was going through the divorce papers when I walked into the living room where she was located. She took a deep breath to calm herself before she spoke. I'm sorry, Brian. Okay. Is that what you wanted to hear? To be honest, it's the first apology you've given me since this whole thing came up. What exactly are you apologizing for, Tracy? I'm sorry that you saw those pictures and found out about them the way you did. I can only imagine how uncomfortable it must have been for you. I see you're sorry I found out, but not sorry you cheated on me. I see. Don't say that. Elliot said that once you realized the benefits of our association, you would come around and accept our group on an intimate level because you would be given the freedom to be with other women, just as I am with other men. Naturally. That's what he said. It seems you and Elliot both suffer from the same mistake of not consulting me on matters such as infidelity. It's a shame you trust his words about my character more than mine. Contrary to popular belief, Elliot is not a keeper of information about me or our marriage. He may be an expert on many things, but as far as knowing me is concerned, he's a failure. Just as you are, apparently. Look, darling, I realize now that I acted wrongly. You're right. I should have talked to you first before getting involved without your knowledge. After seeing your reaction that night, Elliot told me that in hindsight, if I had approached you first, things would have gone much more smoothly. He's still convinced you'll come around, but now I'm not so sure. Why don't you call off this stupid divorce and let us get back to normal? Back on the road again? Tracy, that train has derailed and done irreparable damage. There's no getting it back on the tracks. You blew it up with dynamite when you let that butthole take you to bed, and then you betrayed me as well. Just sign the papers and let us both pick up what's left of our lives and go our separate ways. I know you, Brian. You don't want Bobby to end up in a single-parent family to be raised by two parents living in separate homes. If I remarried, you wouldn't want him calling another man daddy. No man wants that for his son. Think about it. Reconciliation is the best option for both of us. I wouldn't want him to call another woman Mom. If you remarry after a divorce like you did, that's probably true. You should have thought about all this before you betrayed your vows, not after. You're right. It would have killed me to hear him call another man Daddy, but it's better come from a broken home than to live in a house full of lies and deceit. If we hadn't gotten divorced, I still wouldn't be part of your company of whores and harlots. They may be physically attractive, but to me they are disgusting, and you would continue to entertain whomever you saw fit. But it will never be me. I can never be intimate with you again, Tracy. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. That's not what you mean. You're just saying that to hurt me, and it really hurts. So one. Brian. Look, what if I gave up on the idea, completely swore I'd never get involved in their relationship again? What if I turned my back on them as friends? I'm desperate. Honey, you and Bobby are two of the best things that have happened to me in my entire life. I'm sorry. You think I've turned my back on us, but it's not true. I value you to above anything else in the world. I hear the words you say, Tracy, but I just don't believe you. You've already proven yourself to be a liar. Now I can't trust a word you say. It's too late. Just sign the papers and get this over with as soon as possible. Never. I'll never sign those darn papers as long as I live. I don't want a divorce. And I will fight you every step of the way, no matter how long it takes. I may have lost you at this point, Brian, but I want you back. I'm not going to give up. I believe in us more than you do. I'll crawl to you on my hands and knees until you take me back. Too bad you didn't have enough faith in us to stay true to your wedding vows. You've heard the old aphorism, once cheated, always cheated. And it is through that prism that I will always look at you, I quipped. She started sobbing again, perhaps from the realization that she was facing an impossible task. What now? She asked. I hope you don't expect me to leave. I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying here with Bobby. Besides, we have nowhere else to go. She mumbled. You're right. Now that you're out of the world, Bobby has become my whole world to me. I don't want to spend any more time away from him than necessary. That's why I've decided to continue living here while the divorce is going through. I continued, Do not worry. I won't get in your way. I will no longer require you to do my laundry, cook my meals, or clean up after me. You take care of your needs. I'll take care of mine, and we'll both take care of Bobby's needs. All I ask is that you don't touch me with your contaminated body. To me, you are a walking contagion from head to toe. You are disgusting to look at, disgusting to think about, impossible to stay married to. We will coexist under the same roof, but it will only be coexistence until divorce, which will never lead to reconciliation. As she pondered my words, her elation was replaced by dejection. I heard what you said, Brian, but divorce is a long road and we both know a lot can happen in that time. I'm going to get you back, honey, I swear I will. As long as you keep meeting and hanging out with your so-called friends, you won't have a chance in heck. I will never socialize with them again. As you so aptly pointed out, I don't own you, and I can't control your behavior. But if you ever bring one of your jerk lovers here, I swear on my life that you and he will seriously regret it. Is that clear? Of course, sweetheart, I already told you. I'll turn my back on them if that's what it takes to get you back. Do you want me to quit my job and become a full-time mom? No, it's too late for that now. Besides, if you did that, I'd only be paying more in child support in the divorce. She didn't like my return, but she kept a cheerful smile for my benefit. I decided that the days of our confrontation were behind us. There was nothing she could say now that would make me lose my temper and berate again. We'd both had enough of insults and innuendo. I could be professional, both at work and at home. I decided to treat this as a temporary business arrangement. Nothing was going to stop me from spending time with my son. For a few weeks, we communicated politely, saying only what was necessary. Surprisingly, we agreed to several suggestions from my attorney. B in the interim. I would pay all rent if Tracy would pay all utilities. I canceled all utilities in our joint names and reissued them in her name only. Both of our cars were already paid off, so we each paid our own gas and insurance. We each took care of our own meals, so there was no need to share groceries. Being financially free of it was not as difficult as I had anticipated. Since I was still paying the lion's share of our expenses, she accepted it. I transferred half of our savings to a new account opened in my name only, and left the balance in an account in her name. She was quite unpleasant to me for a few days after that, but soon realized that I was only enforcing the terms of the divorce agreement, which she politely refused to sign anyway. Tracy made every effort to come up with an excuse to ask me questions and engage me in conversation. I was always polite and never turned her down unless she got personal. I never asked her for anything or started conversations. One day I was going through a desk drawer in my room looking for socks of a certain color, and it occurred to me that I hadn't seen the 3 pictures of their meeting. I urgently searched all the drawers in case I had moved them and forgotten about it. They weren't there, and I knew who had taken them. I scrutinized the lock on my door with a magnifying glass, and only then noticed the fine scratches. She would never have been able to pick the lock on her own. She must have called a locksmith to do it for her and produce a key. That was the only explanation. The next day, I bought 2 new identical locks and installed them on the bedroom and bathroom doors, and the only new keys back in my pocket. She didn't want me to know that she could get into my room anytime she wanted, and I didn't want her to know that she no longer had access until she tried again. Her continued betrayal to protect her lover further confirmed that my decision to divorce was the right one. Now I wondered if she would lie and claim that her date with Elliot never happened. After a few months of détente, she began periodic, asking me to take her out, to eat or to go. A movie in general to anything resembling a date or a couple's activity, I always politely declined such offers. I could see that she was getting nervous. She was used to going out with her friends a few times a month. She really wanted to be with them again, but she remembered her promise not to socialize with them. Then I started receiving calls and messages from them, inviting me to go out or even stay alone if I wanted to. To avoid a repeat of similar calls or messages, I banned the number without answering. In mid-December, she invited me to a Christmas party at her company. I gently declined, citing my obligation to babysit a young kid, but told her to have a good time. We'd always been there together in the past. The next weekend was my company's celebration. I had intended to go alone, but she did not want to do it in the evening. She took Bobby to his babysitter's residence. I cleverly left for the party without saying anything to her. Apparently, she followed me in her car and located me at the party. As usual, she was absolutely attractive. She tried to make small chat with me in front of others. However, I had minimal interaction with her when I was alone with him. Vice President Dan inquired whether we had made up. I explained the issue, and he just chuckled, saying I had the fortitude to live under such circumstances. However, I made it obvious that I did not want to squander any time with my son at this time. He understood my situation. I left the party and went straight to the babysitter's house to pick up Bobby. He slept the whole way home. I expected Tracy to disappoint Dad and chastise me after the party, but she was so happy to be with me for any reason that she appeared appreciative for the tiny crumbs of attention she had unwittingly garnered in public. Tracy wore very little clothing about the house at all times. I used my engineering talents to sell a resistor in parallel with the thermal store incorporated into our digital thermostat, which controls the temperature. The resistance value I chose caused the heating temperature set point to be 5 degrees lower than the display temperature, resulting in a cooler house than typical. My plan was to urge her to put on warm clothing. I was somewhat effective in doing so. 2 weeks later, I removed the fixed value resistor, restoring normal and accurate operation. At least I tried. 5 months after it was serviced, she told me she was going to have supper with her best friend Cassidy every Saturday. If I did not mind seeing Bobby, I casually replied that I didn't mind as long as she didn't invite that fool or any of her partners inside the house. My employer sponsored a bowling league, so I decided to join on Saturday nights when she was gone. I had a lot of fun making a total fool of myself on the lanes, and Bobby was overjoyed to attract so much attention from the females in attendance. It was so much better than sitting at home, wondering what Tracy was up to or who she was. One day I arrived home later than she did, and she inquired as to where I had been. Bobby. I spoke the truth. She requested if she could come with me the next time, and I told her honestly that I only leave the house when she does and never sit at home alone. My response irritated her, but satisfying Tracy was no longer my issue. She frequently questioned how we could ever be a loving couple again if I never gave her the chance. She never signed the divorce documents. It was expected to take the entire year. 6 months after the service, my attorney, Bob Thornton, phoned me to advise me that Tracy's attorney had successfully pushed for 10 mandated marriage counseling sessions, 2 each week. I had to attend them and couldn't just sit there silently for the entire time. I had to answer every question the counselor posed to me. I asked her whether I may use the same simple, brief sentence for each query. She replied she didn't care what I said as long as it was relevant to our marriage. I thanked her before hanging up. Of course, Tracy's lawyer made certain that the marriage counselor was the type of person who favors the wife and openly mocks the husband. I didn't care what the therapist thought of me as long as I responded to Tracy and the therapist's questions and statements in accordance with the law. I replied that I do not want to stay married to a promiscuous woman. Not many minutes later, they were both frustrated and angry with me. While my repeated statement was terse, it was also relevant to our marriage. I smiled as both women threw verbal abuse at me. I did not raise my voice, insult anyone, or use filthy words. Following the fifth unsatisfactory session, the therapist canceled the remaining sessions, citing the United Nations, productivity, and waste of time. The remaining months passed with little change. I continued to spend every spare minute with Bobby, and I could tell he sensed the particular link I had fought so hard to establish. Tracy moved out of the house 4 days before the divorce hearing, accompanied by Bobby. I was also given a restraining order to keep away from both of them until the court date. B subsequently contacted me with 2 scoops. I tried to warn you, Brian. She claims that on 3 occasions she was coerced. She didn't report it at the time because she wanted to reconcile, claiming it was a price she was ready to pay to keep her child in a 2-parent household. However, she claims that the last time you insisted she feel ill, you allegedly forced her to go to the hospital. Documents supplied by her counsel reveal multiple bruises as evidence. She has countersued for full custody, allowing you only infrequent visits with supervision. I'm afraid she has you stumped. Is there any truth to what she claims? You know me far better than that. Not a single word is true. Not a single word. Okay, I really needed to hear it from you. I will fight for you to the end. However, without substantial evidence to back up your denials, I have little hope of overturning her charges. B. Has she submitted all of the information you stated would be required to investigate her allegations? Yes, she did. I have the information in a folder at my office. Could you please email me the information her attorney provided? Sure. For what it's worth, you can't call her, email her, text her, or contact her or your son in any manner until I say otherwise. Do you understand? Nothing. If she calls and you hear her voice, don't say anything. Simply hang up immediately. Understood? She placed an order. Got it? I repeated. 2 days later, I walked into the house after work and was surprised to see Tracy sitting at the kitchen table. Her car was nowhere to be found. Maybe she'd gone with someone else. She waited for me. I didn't know why. My first thought was to flee so as not to break the restraining order, but she yelled out loudly before I could go. Brian, turn around and listen to me if you want to see Bobby again. She clearly had my attention. However, in an attempt to avoid speaking with her, I simply stared at her face and maintained my distance. Well, you don't have to say anything, just listen. I remained calm and avoided any gestures that could be interpreted as angry or belligerent. First, please hand me your cell phone so that I may turn it off. I put it on the kitchen table. She grabbed it up and switched it off to ensure that there was no recording. I tried everything I could to get you to back down, but you were so adamant. I had to take extreme measures. How does it feel to be in the other person's shoes? It's not particularly pleasant, is it? I apologize, Brian, but you gave me no choice. I had to claim we had love, which you demanded by turning back the clock. But Elliot persuaded me that I needed a backup plan in case your lawyer was convincing enough to disagree. So I made up a tale about how you hit me out of fury. We both know that you never touched me. I've already stated that you will never hit me in a million years, and I believe it even now. But I needed to ensure that I had complete custody of our boy, leaving you with only crumbs of time to spend with our infant. It saddens me to be so cruel to you, Brian, but it puts me in an advantageous position to negotiate with you. Tracy cleared her throat and proceeded. If you cancel the divorce, make it go away, and freely consent to us joining our group of friends, as they graciously offered. Then I will lift the restraining order, move in with you, and we can restart our happy marriage. Bobby would not be born into a single-parent family. He would be reared by both parents, who lived peacefully under the same roof. Think about it, Brian. What is not to like? I promise you'll get used to it soon. I'd love to show you the new techniques I've learned right here and now. If you wish, maybe that's too soon. What do you say, Brian? Why don't you get off your high horse and join me in the real world for a change? I promise you will have a nice time. I stared her directly in the eyes. I told her I was definitely contemplating her offer. So, if I go with you and your pals, Do you promise not to limit my access to Bobby in any way? Why on earth would I stand between a loving parent and his son? You and I both know that the youngster prefers you to me. He asks for you all the time, and it hurts my heart to separate him from you. Please say yes, Brian. Simply say yes, and all of our issues will disappear, she encouraged. First I lost you, and then my son. My existence is awful. I really miss Bobby. I want to be with him so much, I cried. Brian, one word from you will fix everything, and everything will be restored, she reassured me. Allow me time to consider things through. I need to do some mental gymnastics to figure out how to introduce you to other males. I only need time, okay? Okay, baby, I have you figured out. You always evaluate everything with an engineering mindset. We'll appear before a court in 2 days. I need to hear from you by tomorrow. Just SMS me a single word. Yes. So I know you agree, and I will make things right again. However, if I do not hear from you before the hearing, I will punish you for the rest of your life. Your son will grow up to hate you. I'll take care of that, and you'll pay me for it. Please don't make me do this to you for Bobby's benefit. Okay, honey. Do the right thing for him. That jerk struck me where it stung the most. My son. Nothing in the world is as important to me as this tiny kid. I will respond as soon as I can. For now. Please leave, I insisted. She strolled by me, a sneer on her face. She realized she had me by the balls. I held my breath till I heard the door close and looked out the window. I noticed a gleaming Lexus pull up next to her. The driver, of course, was butthole Elliot Franklin. He must have a massive boner for her to go to such extent to include her in his circle. I had a lot to think about. B informed me that my participation at the divorce hearing was unnecessary. My presence would not influence the outcome, but I wanted to be there. As I was leaving the men's room to go to court, Tracy popped out of nowhere and growled, "You had a chance, silly moron. I will tell you what's in there. Your son will never know your name and will grow up to address another guy. Father, I will marry a genuine man who is not insecure, who trusts and believes in me and our marriage, and who, unlike you, is eager and open to new experiences." Then she spat in my face and dashed away, accompanied by the glances of bystanders who wondered what awful crime I had committed against such a lovely woman. I took a handkerchief to wipe my face before entering the courtroom and taking a seat at the back. I waited my turn, hoping that my attorney was at least half as good as her reputation. I had a lot on my plate today as I waited my turn. It was fascinating to learn about some of the strange divorce instances. I realized that individuals who represented themselves were as foolish as they seemed. Our case was not heard until 1 p.m., making for a long day. Tracy was called to testify first after filing a restraining order and accusing me of mistreating her. Divorce was a small issue. I listened closely as she described everything I was accused of, including the dates, hours, and particular locations of the purported assaults. This was her opportunity to obtain custody, child support, alimony, and even jail time, because, weirdly enough, the prosecutor had not yet filed formal accusations against me. I said nothing. She cried as she described her awful attacks on me. My attorneys secretly drew floral motifs in the margins of the notes they provided to her. Tracy's lawyer expertly painted a coherent image of my aggressive temperament and unsuitability as a father or guardian of a fragile toddler. He added that Tracy had made every effort to reconcile prior to my most recent attack. She said that I wrongly accused her of cheating and that my jealousy had ruined our marriage and family. She now decided that divorce was the best decision for herself and the child. After presenting his reasons and resting, the attorney smiled nicely and took her turn with Tracy. I'd like to clarify and reaffirm for the record that you are 100% positive about the dates, hours, and locations of the attacks you accused Mr. Wilson of. Can you be wrong? Mrs. Wilson B. stared at him carefully. No, ma'am. I understand everything completely. My attorney advised me to adequately capture the events in case such scenarios arose, and I jotted everything down on a calendar I kept stashed away. I see. So you swear under oath that the claims you're making against my client are true? Yes, ma'am. I wish I could say otherwise, but the truth needs to be told. Tracy snorted tearfully in answer. There are no other inquiries, Your Honor. Be informed, Judge. Mrs. Wilson, you may leave now. Thank you, Judge, Cora Feldman advised Tracy. She and her attorney were surprised that my attorney had not questioned her more closely. Her smirk was directed at me as she stood up to depart the witness box set altogether. She realized it was a win-win. Even my lawyer had not questioned any of her statements. She was ready to keep her promise to me and turn my son against me. I shivered at the thought. Your Honor, I'd want to invite Mr. James McMahon to the stand to testify. The judge nodded in approval, and a plain man with no face sat up front. Tracy and her attorney conferred, and she simply shrugged. He was clearly strange to her. Sir, could you please mention your entire name for the record? B questioned James Winifred McMahon. Thank you, Mr. McMahon. Can I call? Are you James? Jim, please call me Jim. Of course. Thank you. Jim, could you please inform the court where you work and what your business is? Yes, ma'am. I own and operate McMahon Investigative and Security Services. Jim, could you explain the court how you met my client, Mr. Wilson? Yes. He approached me approximately 14 months ago. Concerned about his wife, Mrs. Tracy Wilson, he suspected her of cheating but had no evidence. We provide private investigative services to validate or deny such assumptions, and he promptly contacted us. I see. Jim, what did you uncover during your observation of Mrs. Wilson? We were able to acquire evidence of her adultery and presented him with 3 photos of her in bed with another man. Were the images you gave him the sole copies of her dating history? No, ma'am. We viewed all images, videos, and safe cloud storage. We understand the need of a clear chain of evidence and are fully licensed agents who are respected in this and other circuit courts. We have all the originals. Mr. Wilson has only been provided with copies. Do you have any more copies of these photographs, sir? Yes, we do. Right here. I can confirm that they are copies of the uncorrupted originals. Thanks, Jim. If it pleases the court, Your Honor, we would want to enter 3 copies of the original images taken by McMahon Investigative Services as evidence. The judge accepted the photographs, reviewed them, nodded, and handed them over to the bailiff. Processing. Thank you, Your Honor. So, Jim, does that mark the end of your relationship with Mr. Wilson? No, ma'am. He was afraid that her affair with an unknown person could be ongoing and sought me for advice on how to determine whether it was. I suggested that Mr. Wilson install hidden small cameras and microphones throughout the house, which could be monitored at all times. Such gadgets could record phone calls, secret meetings, and explicit depictions of infidelity. And Mr. Wilson engaged your firm to handle this for him? Yes, ma'am. We installed the equipment the following day when Mr. and Mrs. Wilson were at work. Objection, Your Honor. Attorney Tracy protested. I see where this is headed, and before this matter proceeds any further, I request that you deem it inadmissible. All evidence acquired via those filthy covert cameras. Mr. Wilson could have easily edited or manipulated any of those recordings to make the situation appear the way he wanted and defame my client. This is unconscionable. Judge Corey Feldman heard the objection and looked at me before ruling on it, Counselor. I'd like to know if there are any reasons for it. Attorney Thornton. Thank you, Your Honor. Jim, could you please explain to the court what type of monitoring system you installed in Mr. Wilson's home at his request? Of course, all of the cameras send data wirelessly to a laptop computer concealed in a subfloor beneath the house. The laptop is connected to a wired Ethernet hub, which continuously sends all captured data to our secure cloud servers. Mr. Wilson does not have access to the raw records. The laptop does not have any local records or data. Other than the web address used to send and store streaming material, Mr. Wilson and anybody else seeking access to these materials must contact my business. I firmly advised him on this approach to ensure that the chain of evidence is always examined. Of course, we supply Mr. Wilson with information that we believe will be beneficial to him and alert him of the situation. After evaluating the records, Mr. Wilson's engagement with the system is limited to the monthly replacement of camera transmitter batteries. Judge Feldman gave Jim a smile and a nod. Mr. McMahon, I have seen you in my courtroom before. Your firm has a great reputation. The objection was overruled. Thank you, Your Honor. Be encouraged, Jim. You heard Tracy Wilson's testimony accusing me of assault. She reached out a piece of paper to him. Here are the dates and times of the alleged assaults as described by Tracy Wilson. Jim, do you think her claims have any merit? No, ma'am, they do not. What makes you so certain, Jim, when your office provided us with those particular dates, hours, and locations? My team went back and reviewed the archive recordings recorded on those dates and locations at Mr. Wilson's house. In both occasions, the recordings depict a relatively tranquil home with Mr. Wilson joyfully playing with his son and Tracy Wilson alone in another room of the house. When the alleged attacks occurred, there was peace and quiet in the Wilson home. The video footage showed no acts of violence. Tracy and her attorneys seemed to be interested in the stains on the floor. There was no eye contact. Her case was a wreck. Jim, could you please provide any additional information about the claims she made against Mr. Wilson? Yes, ma'am, I can. I have attached a transcript of a phone call made by Mrs. Wilson the day before she moved in. It's simply her account of the conversation, of course, but she clearly states that she hates seeing her husband, whom she says she adores, being treated in this manner, but that someone else was beating her up so she could pretend it was his. It's very evident. She has indicated that she intends to use this as leverage against him to persuade him to give in to her demands. Objection, Your Honor. That is hearsay. Her attorney growled, "If necessary, I can provide original tapes of her saying all those words in her own voice." However, the transcript is a mirror image of the words she spoke on the phone to someone other than her spouse. Jim responded angrily. Tracy's lawyer sat down and made no further objections. He stated, "Thank you, Jim, for your expert testimony. No more questions, Your Honor." He sat back down. Judge Feldman looked at Attorney Tracy. "Do you want to question this witness, counselor?" "Defeated," he said. "No queries, Your Honor." Judge Feldman ruled, "You may exit the room, Mr. McMahon. Thank you." After my private investigator took his place, the judge proceeded. "I see what's happening here. An innocent guy is accused of crimes that it is clear to the court that he did not commit in an attempt to persuade the court to grant full custody of the mother's child. Mrs. Wilson thereby commits perjury. Perjury, a third-degree crime, can lead to up to 36 months in prison. The transcript of this hearing will be given to the district attorney for potential prosecution. It is my hope that he will bring accusations against you. Mrs. Wilson, I hereby grant complete custody of Bobby Wilson to his father, Brian Wilson. Tracy Wilson will be granted visitation rights at Mr. Wilson's discretion. Mr. Wilson, I urge you to be generous in your visits. Your child needs to spend time. His mother. I nodded in agreement to the judge, she continued. Given Mrs. Wilson's brutal treatment of her husband, I believe child support should be awarded. But I'm not without compassion. Tracy Wilson receives alimony of $1,000 per month, payable on the first of each month for 3.5 years or 42 months. Each of you will keep your cars. The checking and savings accounts will be divided evenly between the spouses based on the balances in each. The divorce petition is currently submitted. Both parties will keep their retirement accounts because Mr. Wilson will have primary custody of the child. The court will not grant child support. Mr. Wilson, as a custodial parent, I give you the authority to make decisions about your current residence. Do you want to stay or move? I stood up. My honor, I have no desire to reside there any longer. Tracy can continue to rent the house if she wishes. In any event, I'm moving out. Very nicely, Mr. Wilson. Mrs. Wilson will inherit the current residence's lease. Mrs. Wilson. Tracy stumbled to her feet and then stood up. You have up to 8 hours to return the child to Mr. If you refuse to cooperate, you will be found in contempt of court. Is this understood? She answered, Yes, Your Honor, through tears. Good. The judge has permitted it. I recommend that you take necessary action before leaving this building today. I lift all restraining orders and grant the divorce petition in Wilson. Wilson, you should both get divorce decrees within 30 days. Tracy cried in sadness as she learned she had lost her family. She turned to me to follow the judge's command. If you don't mind, Brian, I'll bring Bobby over to your house tonight after supper. I would like to spend a few more hours with him before turning him over to the judge. That will not be necessary, Tracy. I've been waiting to see how this trial will conclude. I've already found a new apartment and plan to have some friends help me relocate there as soon as I get out of here. I reached out a piece of paper to her. Here is the address to my furnished apartment. I'm only taking Bobby's stuff, my personal possessions and tools. You can keep all of your furniture. Bring Bobby to this address tomorrow at noon. I should have settled in by then. She nodded regretfully at me. If anything, I apologize. I'm so sorry. This is not what I expected. Well, because life with me was so boring and monotonous, you may now enjoy the intriguing and happy love life you've been looking for without me. Good luck with your next open marriage, I said cynically. She said nothing back. Brian, I'd like to thank you. For what? For not targeting Elliot and Gail Franklin? They're very great individuals. Too bad you won't get to know them like I did, she added graciously. Not an issue. I have no interest in Elliot or Gail Franklin. They don't exist for me. No, neither Elliot nor Gail. But I can tell you who I am interested in doing business with. The company you work for. I learned out from HR that your company has a stringent non-brotherhood policy, since there are so many women working there and they want to keep them safe from predators. I will sue your organization tomorrow, claiming that flagrant violations of their policies destroyed my marriage and almost cost me my son. Ronald Hensley will be identified as the principal culprit. He apparently slept with a dozen female employees, which is against corporate policy. You may have heard about him. He is your manager. Tracy stood bewildered, her mouth expanding and closing like a fish in water. I continued. Ronald has a wonderful wife, Lydia, and 2 elementary-aged children. I am not sure if she is aware of his shenanigans with other ladies. But don't worry. I'll make sure she understands everything, even Rita. Consuela, the lady he says he's been married to for so long, and his most cherished love on earth. You may know her as Gail. But why? Why did you do this? His wife and children do not deserve to be ruined in this manner, she pleaded. Why? He ruined my marriage. Why should I not destroy it? He almost stole my son. Why shouldn't he tell his children the truth? Even today, you defend and protect him. How insightful. If you stay for a while longer, Tracy, you might be able to attract the man of your dreams, your wonderful sweetheart. Something tells me he could get divorced in a year or less. The only disadvantage of having a sweetheart is that he may soon become unemployed, exactly like your other call center girlfriends. It appears that their silence in condemning Ronald's terrible behavior breaches corporate policy. You want all of us fired. But how will I support myself now? She. Do not worry. Your employment is safe. I assured your firm that I would not disclose this as long as they kept you on staff, with the hope that you would eventually create your own herd of horses. I can only image how lovely your life will be once I'm no longer in the way. When you describe how the seriousness has strengthened our marriage, I'm sure the ladies will be brimming with want to join you. You may have difficulty hiring another manager. Perhaps one of the husbands will take on leadership responsibilities. Just think all of the thrilling new possibilities. I am excited, but why are you safeguarding my job while dismissing everyone else? She babbled for only one reason. Tracy, I agree with the judge that Bobby needs a mother in his life. It's not a dream job and it doesn't pay well. But it is enough, so you can survive without having to rely on me for money. When he asks me how I treated you during the divorce, I hope to be able to honestly claim I was fair. If you tell him differently, I will show him the evidence. Tracy and her friends had no idea that I had known her lover's genuine name since day one. My private investigator performs an amazing job and is worth every penny I pay him. An engineer always approaches a problem with prior knowledge. If you don't know the answer, locate someone who does. This is exactly what we do. Become my shark lawyer. Tracy's call center was sued for $1.5 million and settled for a handsome sum. She kept $250,000. The rest went to me. On the day I received my paycheck, I sent Tracy a lump sum check for $42,000. My child support responsibilities were paid in full by her own firm, and there was still plenty left over. Now I could build my ideal home. Word traveled rapidly in the office. Many single girls where I work saw me as a potential target. But after just getting off this roller coaster, I believe, I'm going to focus on Bobby for a time before I start dating again. Thank you for taking the time to hear today's story. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe if you have not already. If you have a story to share regarding your or someone else's situation, please do not hesitate to contact me. Take care.